Hello and welcome back to LTC Heroes by Experience Care. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I am your host. I'm excited today because I'm going to be talking to Matt Lessig. He's the Associate Executive Director at Cypress Cove at HealthPark, Florida. Matt, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the time.
Matt, before we hit record, we were talking about what it's like to be in charge of a facility in Southwest Florida with the hurricane. But before we kind of get into crisis management and how you all are doing as a community, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me specifically how you got into long-term care, and feel free to get into the weeds as much as possible. If you remember your first day, or if you remember a mentor, if you remember being nervous, tell me about that.
Sure, absolutely. So, it kind of I kind of fell into it a little bit. So, went to college here locally at Fort Myers at Florida Gulf Coast University. Was just kind of going for a business degree. Wasn't sure exactly where I'd land my feet, but I did know my parents. So my mother was a nurse for 20 plus years. She was in the healthcare side of things. Lee Health is a huge kind of acute care, primary care, campus across Fort Myers. So when I graduated, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew if I got into the healthcare system, because it's such a, we're probably talking like 14,000 employees type of system. So if I could get my feet wet somewhere in this campus at Lee Health, I could find a path I'd enjoy. So there was a job opening actually at a skilled nursing facility in their business department. And so I applied for it, actually got the role, found out later on that it was, skilled nursing. It was a nursing home. I didn't have any siblings growing up. My family was all kind of, I guess you could say we just had like an older group in our family. I didn't have cousins. Every group there were no kids, I guess you could say, like our family functions. Okay. So I just had like a innate ability to, spark up conversation with that demographic, that population. I really enjoyed hearing their stories and kind of learning about, how they got to where they were. So I really kind of fell in love with the building and the nursing home. After a little bit, maybe a year or so, I knew that the finance track, because I was doing like patient billing, and I was on the AR side of things, and I knew I didn't really want to stay in the finance track. So I asked my administrator at the time, how do I kind of get your job? Like what does it take to, kind of try to be the pilot of one of these buildings? And luckily he was a preceptor. And so he said, I can definitely help you get there. And so he kind of developed a path for me to get there. I did my administrator and training program under him. And he really kind of took me on under his wing and really helped me kind of see the whole side of long-term care and the responsibility it has, and how what we do really comes down to our residents and patient care. And I just really bought into that system and really enjoyed it ever since. And now I've kind of been administrator now for 5 years, I think.
And how long ago did you get into long-term care?
Yeah, so basically I started at that SNF here locally in Fort Myers in 2013. So really been in it for 8-9 years now.
And what was the biggest learning curve, biggest challenge for you to go from back office to the clinical side of things?
Yeah, so I think it was fast. It's fast paced. Things are happening so quick on the clinical side, with people just changing conditions and things like that, and you're trying to keep up with it on a daily basis with your team. And so I think just the speed of a building. It was a 112 bed building, so not like extremely large, but definitely not super small. So I think it was getting used to kind of that speed and flow of operations, and having your key people and who you need to go to, and how you can get things done. I think business office, I felt, was like the same speed every month. We did this on the first week, we build this. The next week we worried about AR. Then so like there was a lot of structure in that department. But when you go on the other side of things, and you got families calling you got staff concerns, you got everything's coming at you at 100 miles an hour. You got to juggle it, and so I think the speed of everything was quite quite a challenge at first.
Tell me a little bit about your organization. Tell me about where Cypress Cove is today, where it was, when you joined 9 years ago, and kind of what you would say your differentiators are, whether it be your culture, your team, the size, the location, and just give me kind of a feel for the landscape.
Yeah, sure. So I actually I actually joined Cypress Cove just a couple years ago. I left Lee Health after about 7 years and joined Cypress Cove a couple years ago. But it's a continuing care retirement community. So on a campus like this, you have independent living, but then you have the stages of healthcare kind of following that as those residents, when they buy in, need that care. So we have a 44-bed assisted living facility. We have a 44-bed memory care. We have a 64-bed SNF. So that kind of compartmentalize like our healthcare side of the campus. And that hasn't grown overwhelmingly, I would say, too much size-wise in the last few years, or really we've had like one addition. We built the memory care about 5 years ago on this campus. So we only had about the 44 traditional assisted living, and then we built a specific 44-bed memory care assisted living. But what we've kind of been doing is we've really been expanding our service line from Cypress Cove's perspective. So we now have like a home health. We started a home health side to our portfolio. So instead of just being strictly in the four walls of our campus, we've started trying to figure out how we can take our product outside of the four walls. So we've expanded into private duty nursing. We've expanded into our home health side of the industry, and then we even have our own medical clinic on our campus, which is really a great bonus for our residents that live here. They can pop down to our clinic and basically can be treated as almost like their primary care.
Is there? I don't speak to a lot of clinical or even executive directors who start in the back office. Are there any unique ways that you approach growth and diversification of your organization because of your back office? And are there any specific kind of ways, kind of bridge, when you're either talking to the board or you're talking to leadership, that you feel like I've been in both places, that you think help you as a leader?
Yeah, so I think one big piece was I really understood reimbursement. So I really understood the reimbursement model, being in the business side of things. So I knew where, I kind of understood like what type of clientele would be more advantageous reimbursement wise, or where I saw things, trending as far as, we brought in a new payment model, with PDPM. There's things that I was able to see, kind of coming down the road, and knew that from a reimbursement perspective, if we kind of shifted maybe some of our focuses this way, or some of our clinical, some of our clinical components to fit more of this diagnosis, or where was the hospital kind of struggling with readmissions on their campus, because we have a big partnership with one of our hospitals is literally maybe 200 yards away, like a stone throw away. So building those partnerships and understanding what they needed to see, because they're getting penalties for readmissions, and so I think just having some of that mindset from the economics of our model. I understood how tight our margins are and where our big expenses are, reviewing the financial sheets and things like that, and understanding how our costs were, continuing to grow up, and where we could find opportunities to make the margins, maybe a little bit better for us.
I know from kind of our previous chat that QAPI is a passion of yours, and it's not something that often comes up in interviews. So I do want to talk about it. Tell me, I guess let's go along the exact same track. Given your first experience coming in more from a business point of view, how do you approach QAPI, and what insights do you have from coming from the reimbursement side of things and seeing the numbers before you get to the care side?
Yeah, so I think from a QAPI perspective, what I really enjoy about it is I like data, I like analytics, I like tracking, trending. I like to know like where we've been and where we're going. just helps my mindset, helps me understand. I'm very visual, so I like charts, I like graphs. So I've really kind of, with my team, really emphasized and brought, QAPI to a fairly kind of, high level informative program that I think only makes our operations better when we're really fully using the tools we have. I really like to, trend and track those data points, some of our key metrics from a service line, that we want to trend and track.
Are there any new metrics that you've put into, your program in the last year or two that you're like, man, I wish I would have been looking at this 9 years ago, 10 years ago, and you're like, this is an innovative way, I kind of like it. And if if you were going to go to the Florida Healthcare Association tomorrow and a peer was going to knock on your door and say, hey, what are you doing in QAPI that I should think at, what would you tell them?
I mean, I think anytime you have an opportunity to really look at, some of those key, not risk factors, but some of those key areas that, from a clinicalist perspective, that maybe your team isn't thriving in. So like, if there's different, diagnoses that you're tracking. So like, say we're tracking, what everyone's admission diagnosis is, and then we circle in on which ones are getting bounced back to acute, from our population of residents, and then kind of honing in on what were the similarities of those, and really kind of focusing on, were there any common themes to that? What were we maybe not doing earlier on, or what information would have helped us from the beginning? And I think if I'd have known to like dig deeper into some of that stuff earlier on, and not just say, hey, we had X number this month, I think years ago could have really been, driving a finer, tooth comb through some of that data.
What would you say would be a specific metric that you're really focused on, maybe this quarter or this year, that you feel, that you've improved upon over the last year? And how do you bring that up in meetings? How do you turn tracking into practice?
Yeah, so I think, it starts with picking that key metric, like you said. So, say we were, let's use readmissions, for instance. So we were, we were struggling maybe a year ago, 18 months ago with some readmissions. And that's where we kind of really started taking that finer tooth comb and looking, okay, where can we really improve? Let's look at the providers, what is their input? So we started having, case analysis meetings. So we would bring our clinicians together and kind of do a root cause, if you will. Let's go through, day 1 through day 15 of this stay. Let's see what we were doing. Let's see when we contacted providers. Let's see what our, what was going on throughout that stay. What resources could we have used? Like if there was no budget, let's say there was no budget, what tools, what resources could we have had? To help make a difference for this resident or this patient or whatever may be the cause. And then, we would take that back, look at that information, try to make tweaks and changes. And then, of course, just keep trending and tracking that out to see what transpired. We were doing several pilots with so like we would say there was a company called Keenly Health, and they do like patient monitoring, and we would use some of these pilots to trial different devices in residents' rooms to get a little bit more feedback, a little bit more data, and see if that gave us a little bit of an edge on things. So our organization's very, I would say, very tech savvy, always willing to try a new innovative idea or piece. It's one of the nice things. We don't get a lot of resistance when we want to trial some kind of new technology that maybe isn't super popular yet, or doesn't have a long list of people that would, say this is a game changer, but organizations willing to kind of put their arm out there and see if it can be a difference.
Are there any initiatives that start at the leadership level and then trickle down, versus do you have any initiatives that you're like, let's take this down and do this on one wing, and let's start at the CNA level and just talk it over with the nurse right there and test it, and then we'll bring it back up before we implement it across the board? Do you have any examples that you could give in the way that you approach different initiatives?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it kind of goes both ways. So there's definitely initiatives from our, CEO down as far as what those visions is, what our goals are for the quarter. But we definitely have it the other way where, if we want to trial or pilot, some kind of new implementation or education with, one unit, like say we trialed, like a fall tracking, like, or I should say a fall detection software. Basically would go in the room, kind of like use kind of like a sonar, and it would, hopefully give us about 20 or 30 seconds in advance when somebody was starting to maybe get up out of a chair, get up out of a wheelchair, start moving from their bed, to basically send an alert or notification to like an iPad, tablet, some kind of device that our clinical team would have on hand, and give us maybe a heads up to go, prevent some kind of risk issue. And so, we did a small trial, small pilot with that, like on one unit, just to see if it would be a difference maker. And so we kind of have the ability to do that, where it's kind of like we're trying to, figure out this could work before we just do like some kind of mass expansion of it across, all of healthcare. And so we have had those opportunities to trial things like that.
Tell me a little bit about your leadership style, Matt. And I think just maybe for way of inspiration would be like when your plan with new QAPI metrics and thinking about how do we turn this data into something that we can test and improve upon. Are you a person who brings a problem to the table and say, hey, you all meet on your own or meet in little mini committees and bring back some ideas to me? Or are you a person who said, hey, I've got like 3 different ideas, I want to throw them at you all. Let's start with one. I want to be involved, the first 2 or 3 weeks and see how it works, and then we'll bring it back. Tell me a little bit how those you tease those out into action.
Sure. So, I like to be pretty hands-on. I like to get involved. I like to get into the weeds, if you will, and be part of that, idea creation. I think part of what makes QAPI a success is when you can start, when you trend stuff out. So you kind of can see something's not going right when you start, have repeated, maybe it's for a couple months in a row where something's kind of, taking a dive or taking an upward tick in a direction you don't want it to go. You identify, you kind of self-identify that problem, then figure out, what's going on, like why have all of a sudden, our in-house acquired infections kind of just skyrocketed here this last quarter. Let's get a group together, kind of pop this out to like a side, QA or side, performance improvement, come up with like a PDCA, and work through it. Let's see what, we clearly know what the problem is here. What are some thoughts on maybe why this is happening? What's keeping it, continuing? And then what we see is avenues to try to reduce it. And then let's trial some of these things. I don't want the ideas to just stay up in our mind. Like, let's put, pen to paper and get out there. And if it starts with staff education, let's just start with staff education, but then let's expand and see where we need to take this.
Can you give any specific examples of how you've kind of teased out those ideas into execution?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, once we've, identified something, it's kind of like teasing it out as like, what should be our goal? Like, I like to set a target or a benchmark of where we need to get to. So it becomes you have an end, like not about an end goal, but some kind of way to justify, progress. And so once I've kind of identified, where we need to get to, it kind of becomes like, as a team, guys, let's challenge ourselves to get better. Let's make this a challenge to get better. Let's focus on resident care in this specific area. What action plans do we need to achieve this goal? What is our overall mission on this? And I think when you get the buy-in, like you have to get the buy-in from the team, because there's no way me or some other administrator is going to go in and fix problems on our own. That's not it. So you have to have that buy-in. I think over communicating to the team from the top down to get that buy-in is critical. That's really how I think the change really starts. The team on the floor has to understand the importance of this, just like my leaders do.
What I Matt, I know that you are passionate and also interested in kind of one of the key goals, which is developing clinical care pathways. Can you just start off by explaining what you mean by that goal and that terminology?
Yeah. So when I think of like a specific clinical care pathway, it's taking maybe one diagnosis. We could even just use like an ortho kind of diagnosis, hip revision or hip, and developing a specific plan for when that resident were to enter the building, what kind of care treatment plan they would be on for, say, the first 3 days, 7 days, 14 days of their stay, in a top down 35,000 foot view.
In terms of your goals around that kind of higher level team objective, tell me about how you turn those actually into measurable goals, or are you still just kind of in the planning stage for kind of that development?
Yeah, so we're still, we have some thoughts around our care pathways that we're developing. We're kind of working with, not only where our team thinks they could, thrive, and what pathways our, medical director feels really strongly in, trying to find kind of our niche there, to get really strong at A, B, or C, and then kind of be able to streamline those types of referrals from the hospital campus, right to our setting. And so it goes a lot into kind of the planning, and kind of strategic thinking of what we need to implement in those first, 3 days versus 7 days versus 14 days. What does the treatment plan look like? What kind of therapy needs are going to be needed? Everyone comes in, you try to have a fairly structured program, but everyone's going to come in a little bit different. There's, you and I, we're not always alike and cookie cutters, and day one's going to look like this for everybody. But structuring around, at least we have a plan around those specific, diagnoses to really structure their care.
How do you go about, Matt, how do you go about kind of goals or initiatives where you're more uncertain? Do you call peers in the industry in another county? Do you, sit down with your CEO or the previous administrator and be like, hey, I'm thinking about teasing this out. Like, tell me a little bit on how you work on things that you're not sure what to do.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm lucky enough to my original preceptor is actually the CEO of our organization. He's also a nursing home administrator himself. So it's a strong connection there, as a sounding board, like you said, to kind of bounce things off, or what are your thoughts, on this or that. But I'm also district president of our local FHCA, so of District 16. And so, we have our monthly meetings as well. A lot of times we'll, powwow what's going on in the area. And I might, ask a couple of those administrators, hey, what are you seeing in your building on this or that, or what have you done differently here? Or, we're struggling in X, Y, or Z. And, do you know anyone that's kind of in that same boat, or what they've done to improve it? And so we try to use our colleagues and peers to kind of help with that.
Matt, I want to transition into, what you just went through, being based in Fort Myers, Florida. You guys just went through a hurricane that came right through and was devastating, not only for your tourism, but a lot for your staff. Tell me a little bit about your crisis management plan that you had pre-hurricane, and then the challenges of actually working on that in practice. Is there any part of the execution that you were a little bit weary of, that made you nervous, made you stay up at night?
Yeah, so I think one, it's imperative and great to have a plan. You have a plan, you've reviewed it, the team understands it, but to your point, when it comes to executing and you don't have some of those, and now it's like, the whole area is in a state of emergency, right? So everyone's needing a lot of these same resources now, that in your plan, you feel like, well, this resource was going to be for me, but now this resource is being spread across an entire, so let's look at transportation. It's like, well, I have an agreement with X, Y, and Z transportation. They're going to help me in an emergency. Well, guess what? Their team is, struggling and needs to evacuate their own families and friends. And all of a sudden their transportation isn't there. And now you're thinking, well, that was kind of my transportation. What's my game plan now? So I think that's where, your plan is there, but then the execution sometimes, your plan is going to be pretty variable at times on how you can make certain things happen. And I think that was where I was kind of learning, in the moment, when your plan isn't always being executed just like it is on that binder, in that nice binder we have.
Is there anything about confronting or taking on the challenge of a hurricane that seems way easier post-COVID? Given that we just faced the biggest pandemic in your life and my lifetime, a hurricane's like, oh, I faced COVID, I can handle this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's helped is everyone's just understanding of emergencies now. So just their own calm, collective. Like, I just felt that the team was more just on par with just their normal selves. There wasn't this high anxiety, frantic type of atmosphere around the healthcare and campus. So I think that demeanor that we learned through COVID, went a long way as far as just kind of keeping that strong communication and mental stability.
Matt, as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you kind of a more human question, a more relationship question, maybe more even more vulnerable question. When you moved from back office and billing and the business side over to the clinical side, what are the intangibles of long-term care that you feel like you learned about and really started to appreciate about having more contact with your residents and more contact with your team, that you're like, man, this has made me a better man or a better family man?
Yeah, I think, in the business office, there wasn't a ton of that live in-person interaction. Occasionally you'd meet with a family about some business, questions. But I think when you move to the front and you start hearing everyone's story, dad was this or dad was that, and this is one of his favorite things, and we used to always go do this. Like, I don't know, with your long-term residents, you start to just kind of almost become part of their family. Because you see their family almost more than you see your own. They're coming in usually all the time to go see them. You start learning the siblings, and I think it's taught me to appreciate, when I become an age where I might need some of this support and help, what I would really enjoy from, like, having to live somewhere, what I would want my leadership team to look like, or my staff to look like, and help me and my family through that. I think that's where I kind of put my, personal hat on, and really just appreciate the moments you get to have with a lot of these people, and just hope those are the moments, you get to share for a long time.
I guess my last question for you, Matt, is if Matt, administrator, and who was going to give advice to that AIT, what advice would you give to younger Matt coming into the clinical and getting ready to take on put on a new hat in terms of leadership?
Yeah, I'd say take everything with stride. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be challenge. Don't beat yourself up. Get some rest at night when you can. Stay focused on the regulatory side. Keep understanding the regulatory piece. But at the end of the day, do what you think is best for your residents.
Fantastic, Matt. I really appreciate you joining me on LTC Heroes and kind of sharing your story and what you're doing in Southwest Florida. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate the time.
Look forward to connecting.